guys, sorry I missed videos last week. It was just really hard with all of the travel and performances, and yeah, but now I'm back and they will be back on schedule. So I was thinking about what I wanted to film today and what I wanted to talk about, and conveniently a friend of mine texted me asking to vent about their teacher. And it wasn't necessarily like they're not helping me, it was they don't really know the rep that I want to play. And that's pretty understandable, especially if you focus on new music, because there's so much stuff that's happening. And then they started explaining, and one of the pieces that they didn't know was density 21.5. And that's kind of the point that stuck out to me, is that piece isn't contemporary, it isn't new music, it was written almost 100 years ago. And yet, someone teaching at a college level doesn't know this piece. This piece is something that you have to learn. And it got me thinking about future educators and those of you who want to teach at colleges, and also those of us who are planning to make a living teaching flute, and how important it is to know your repertoire and not just the standards, even though something like density is a standard, but have a working knowledge of what's out there past what you have to learn in school. And again, density is a piece that you should learn in school. That is a piece that you should learn with a teacher while you're still working on your playing. It does have a lot of pedagogical applications in terms of learning how to do key clicks, very high notes, very rhythmic playing, very intense playing. Because of the nature of the piece, it does require a very different sound, and I will make a video about density at some point soon. I really do want to do more of the like a la Cassandra's Dream Song breakdown videos, but that's a whole nother story. But as a teacher, we're tasked with sharing this music with the next generation. And if we're missing 100 years of repertoire, we're not really doing a great job. And again, I'm a contemporary specialist. I love this music. I live and breathe this music. So I get that not everyone is as gung-ho about new music as I am. But again, some of this stuff isn't new music. It just isn't. Like anything that was written like 100 years ago just isn't in the category anymore. 100 years is not new, especially considering how much music has evolved since that piece was written. As is almost a great-grandfather to some of these composers. Like, the man was alive when our grandparents and great-grandparents were alive. That is how long ago these pieces were written. So why is there any situation where that piece isn't something that you've studied, or at least realized that you needed to learn? It's on competition repertoire, and like not competitions that require things like Cassandra on them. It's on like young artist competitions. And yes, density is like the one I'm focusing on, but there's so many people who don't know that rep, but don't even know what exists. And so when you have a student who's as interested in contemporary music as someone like me is, you wouldn't know what to do with me. And the only reason I am in new music now is because I had teachers that supported and found ways to find me repertoire. Yes, I did study with 2 contemporary specialists, but in high school I did have teachers who weren't contemporary musicians. They were orchestral players, or they were just private teachers who didn't specialize in anything particularly. They were just really good teachers. And they fostered my interest. I discovered Messiaen because of my orchestra playing teacher. Like, this woman is the assistant principal of the Cleveland Orchestra. She is as orchestra as it gets, but she still opened my eyes to this world of 1900 to 1960s music. Because again, Messiaen, not contemporary anymore. Not new music. That piece, again, is another standard repertoire piece that sometimes doesn't get taught because teachers don't know it. And that's just a shame because one, that piece is amazing. Messe en la Mer Noire is the piece I'm talking about. I will link my performance of it and a couple others if I can find some, but go watch mine. There's so much repertoire in that 100-year span. We play so much music from the 19th and 18th century, and we don't play as much from the 20th century. And the fact that this teacher didn't know density makes me think, do you know the Machinsky Sonata? Do you know the Mio Sonatine? Do you know the Martinu Sonatina? Like, there's so many pieces from this era that get lost in the mix if you aren't actively seeking them out. And every piece I just named is considered standard repertoire. It was just written after 1900. Some of you might be looking at me like, well, we play the Poulenc Sonata, and yes, that was written in the 1920s, but there's other stuff too. Just playing one piece from an entire century of music isn't okay. Yet we have these teachers that think this is fine. And if you are one of these people and you're watching this video, please, 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 please rethink your teaching style and explore some of the music from even just the first half of the 20th century. I understand that because you get later in the 20th century, there's more techniques involved. But music is evolving and music is growing, and these techniques are things that you do eventually have to be able to teach. And it's not to say that you have to be a specialist, you have to be incredibly good at these things, but knowing what they are and being able to explain it to a student is important, especially since there are contemporary specialists in the world and you might get a budding one in your studio. And being able to foster that, or at least give them resources and information about how to learn how to do this stuff, is incredibly important. And those of you who've been watching me for a long time know that this channel is part of what I'm trying to build as resources for contemporary specialists and also just flutists in general, and like being more aware of the music around them and the music that's happening right now. But I can't do it alone, and I can't do it when there's teachers out there that just aren't aware of what they're missing. I completely respect how much time it takes to learn these contemporary techniques. I've spent the last 8 years of my life focusing on them and really trying to hone in my skills, and anyone who's known me like this past month knows how frustrating it is to learn a new one. And I appreciate that not everyone is going to have the time to really devote to these things. But knowing that they're out there and knowing what repertoire there is, and also taking the time to learn the pieces that your students want to learn is really important. And there's a part of me that knows that a piece brought to the teachers that's from an older era, they would take the time to learn them because they're reputable pieces. But why is it that when something was written less than 100 years ago, suddenly it isn't reputable? Some of these composers are the reason that we exist today, and they deserve as much attention as the people who came before them. Music history is intrinsically linked to itself. Clearly, history is a thing that moves forward from itself. So why are we ignoring this entire period? Or at least only kind of vaguely acknowledging that it exists. So yeah, this was kind of a rant, and I don't really feel bad about that. But if you are interested in being a musician in the modern era, you really do need to have a working knowledge of what was written in the last 100 years, especially stuff that's been considered standard for the past 50 years. And if you want to be a music educator in any means of that word, from private to band to college to whatever it is, you are kind of morally required to at least do your research. And if any of you guys have any questions about that, I am happy to answer. If you want resources, I have quite a few flute ones, and this channel is kind of one as well. I really, really hope that this has some effect on some people because it's something that I'm incredibly passionate about, clearly. And as always, if you like this video, give it a like. If you're new here, subscribe. If you want to support me more, check out my Patreon, and I will see you guys on Thursday.